thanks for joining this conversation with me. I definitely thank you for taking your time to do this.
You're welcome. I think this is important to make sure we shed light on professionals like myself, a clinical social worker, and the role that we have played during this pandemic, and the role that we're continuing to play now that the pandemic is not necessarily over, but we're not in the height of it, but still the rippling effects of kind of what we all experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. So since I guess the start of the pandemic, how do you think that social working and the things that you do on a daily basis, how do you think that stuff changed since the start of the pandemic?
Well, in my role, I work with older adults. So that's the population that I service. And prior to the pandemic, I was, going out to the homes, seeing what resources we could provide, the elderly, which is kind of the most vulnerable population, out there, one of the most vulnerable populations, the elderly and disabled. So just going out there and not only kind of seeing what resources are available, like Meals on Wheels or caregiver assistance, things like that, but also doing some therapy because, a lot of times, people who have those, all those things going on with their health and things like that, it could come overwhelming for them, and they just kind of want to talk about it. So even prior to the pandemic, that vulnerable population of, older adults and people with disabilities, there always was a need. So during the pandemic, you saw that need become even greater, right? Because they are the ones at higher risk for, getting COVID. So they were very, very scared about leaving the house, very scared about letting people in the house, but there's still that need of them needing the services. So how do we address that of, hey, I can't go to the grocery store, but I still need to, get food, and I still need to, get my medications, but I don't want to go out. I'm really scared. So, I saw a lot of, that with that population during the pandemic of just, not being able to access those resources that they would normally be able to access, but also those resources being limited.
Yeah.
So people who would probably normally be able to come out and bring them meals and Meals on Wheels and things like that, they're not able to come out and bring that food. Or there's a greater demand now, so the resources are scarce because everybody needs it, right? So a lot of people can't get out, so there's a greater need. So that population where it kind of was designated for them at one point, now everybody needs it, so it comes a little bit more scarce.
Yeah. So I guess with all that, all those things happening all at once, I know that it's probably created some new barriers for, you, the social worker as well. Like, what are some of those barriers, those new barriers that the pandemic also created while you were trying to, facilitate your job also?
So I think the barriers were definitely the lack of resources, that were available. So I mentioned before, like Meals on Wheels or something like that, which is already a 1 to 2 year wait list in some counties, right?
Yeah.
So then we have a lot more people trying to access, those resources. It may not be Meals on Wheels, but it may be needing, families needing food because they had lost their jobs. So we don't realize like all of those resources kind of come from those funding come from the same pot of money sometimes. So if something has to take from here, it's taken from somewhere else, right? So, we find that a lot of those resources, were not there. And if they were there, so many people are trying to access it that it's kind of comes just a survival of the fittest type, to get those resources. So what about people who, needed a caregiver in there, who are, totally disabled, who need somebody to come help them and things like that? That's a resource, and that's funding, and those resources were scarce because a lot of times those caregivers that a lot of people depend on, they didn't want to come out It was, COVID was going on and a lot of people didn't want people coming in. So it was just a lot of things, happening where people really weren't getting the assistance that they needed. And even for the people who probably didn't need the meals and things like that, it still was the social isolation aspect of it, right? Yeah. So not being able to, let's say, go see family and friends. So that mental disconnect, emotional disconnect from being able to see, family, friends, that normal interaction, especially for older adults. We don't realize how important that is, right? 'Cause they don't have, going to a job and interacting with coworkers and, so that interaction with family and friends is sometimes all they have. And that was gone. So
with all that kind of going on at the same time, do you think that there's anything that could improve, I guess, those barriers or those things that happen? Like, do you think that there's some things that could improve that?
I think that there could have been more delegation of just resources and funding to help. So those vulnerable populations. So for instance, I know that like public schools was, having the drive-through lines where students could get food and, that resource for that, them. But you really didn't see nothing for those older adults who couldn't get out of the home. There were churches and things like that, but it wasn't as accessible and known as things we might have seen on the news for families to get food. Or I think a lot of times, like even financial, resources is hard. It's hard for older adults to get food stamps. Right now, they're, $10, $16, and they're on a fixed income, which, there was, a little bit more pandemic, food stamps and things like that available, but it only goes so far.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that just, having, more funding and things like that could have definitely helped the situation. Definitely.
So what is something that you tell, I guess, new social workers getting into the field like now? What is something that you may tell a new social worker that is just starting out during the pandemic?
Sorry, something's going off. I don't know if you can hear that. It's my work phone. I'll wait till it stops. Oh, let me know when you want me to start.
Yeah. So, what's some of the best advice that you give new social workers?
I would say practice self-care, right? So, making sure that you really take time for yourself, because sometimes seeing everything that's going on, experiencing other people's emotions, we try to, they teach us, in school, try to, compartmentalize it a little bit, but we're all human. Right. So it's hard to do that sometimes. So I don't care how hard you try, you're going to feel that emotion sometimes. Right. All the time. So it could become overwhelming, taking all of that in, taking all people's stresses, struggles, all of that in. So it's important to practice self-care, get a hobby, get something that takes your mind off of everything that's going on and makes you happy and makes you, just decompress.
Yeah.
Right. So we just want to make sure that we have an outlet. So for me, I like to travel. So I make sure I take my vacations, and I, do things with my daughter because that takes my mind off of everything. So just practicing self-care, I think, is important, but also realizing that you can make a difference, even if you don't see it sometimes because there's so much stuff going on.
Yeah,
you can make a difference, and you do. Whether people tell you thank you or not, it's helping them in some way. So don't look at it as wanting that. You're not going to always get that those thank yous that you want. But just know, if you do it because you really want to help people.
Yeah. So when it comes to any new benefits, are there any new benefits for, I guess, being a social worker right now since the pandemic has started? Like, has there been any changes with that?
I would say that there's definitely a demand for social workers, clinicians right now. Mm-hmm. I get, my LinkedIn boxes, are full with recruiters trying to get people to do mental health.
Yeah.
So mental health is a real big thing right now. And just being able to do it Zoom, telehealth. So with me being a clinically licensed social worker, there's just a high demand across the country, federal, state, just to have those mental health resources. So I think that is a good thing. Social workers are the largest mental health providers in the country. A lot of people don't realize that, but we are, because we are able to get people at all levels. So we are very much in demand, which means, hopefully, which I am seeing a little increase in our financials. So just making sure we're financially compensated for the work that we do, because a lot of times social workers aren't. So
last question. So what is the best part, right, about being a social worker? Like, what is the best part for you about being a social worker?
The best part about being a social worker is making a difference. Mm-hmm. Especially with the population that I serve. Yeah. Which I've done all types of social work, but I think that really being able to see people just be so thankful and smiling because you're able to just, talk with them or just get them, some assistance, wherever that may be. Like, it really does, make you feel good about what you do. So I like helping other people. I like, I'm just one person, but if I'm one person and I'm making a difference, then I think that that's something. And I think that we can all make a difference. And so I kind of use that as well. Like, I'm just me, but I'm just doing what I like to do. Yeah. So, that's what I like about social work, because one person can actually help somebody in their life.
Yeah. So that's well said right there. It is. So I definitely thank you for, taking this time out to have this conversation with me, for, I guess the listening audience, because you guys, for what you do an amazing job. Like, you do.
Thank you.
So I definitely appreciate your effort, and then also your service when it comes to helping others. So I want to say thank you for that.